I think this is a conversation that has needed to happen for quite some time, because in a way the Philippines has been written off in the global arena on these issues as just, well, they're just there. You can't do anything about them. It's really fantastic that that is changing, and hopefully, Congressman, changing really fast. And I think that we have to give a special round of applause to the Congressman and to everybody else who's really of this. I'm speaking here, and I'm just going to make 3 very quick sets of remarks so that we can go to the open discussion. The first is, many of you would have picked up on, as you entered, the flyer, which is not a proper printed flyer, but it's just what we pulled off the net, on the creation of a high-level task force for ICPD. This was created by UNFPA a couple of months ago, and it's co-chaired by the former president of Mozambique, President Chissano, and the former president of Finland, President Halonen. And its goal is really to galvanize political support for sexual and reproductive health and rights, and to ensure that international development efforts prioritize the investments that are needed to do so. And this includes programs and policies that promote gender equality, women's empowerment, and the health and rights of young people worldwide. And so we encourage and look forward to collaborating and cooperating with friends, colleagues, and partners in the Philippines in this effort. As I said, if one looks at the Philippines, and I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but if one looks at the Philippines in the context of the rest of Asia, for its level of per capita GDP and its level of girls' education, the Philippines is atrocious in terms of the levels of maternal mortality, the levels of teen pregnancy. It's a total outlier. I mean, for everybody, it's a classic statistical outlier. You see everywhere else, all the other countries, sort of either women's education or per capita GDP, you throw those and you'll find them all clustered nicely. And then you'll find the Philippines off somewhere by itself. And it's very clear that it is where that is coming from. It's the absence of a systematic policy affirmation and access and availability of reproductive health. And as Ginny said, who is it that suffers the most as a result of this? As is the case everywhere where reproductive and sexual health and rights are not backed up strongly legally, it's the poor who suffer, because those who can afford it make their own way, in whichever way we can. But those who really suffer are the poor, and it's poor girls, poor women who suffer badly. So the absence of an RH bill in the Philippines is not only anti-life, as the congressman said, it's also anti-equality, anti-economic equality and social equality. The third point that I wanted to make is that there was one thing though that I wasn't aware of and that I learned just from your presentations today, and that is the importance of having an overarching law that enshrines this in law. That otherwise you're at the mercy of random administrative ups and downs. So whoever and whichever, you get a Gloria and then you get one thing. And I thought it was completely ironic that when you had the womanizing male president, you had the best situation for reproductive health for women, and then you get the woman president, and you get complete disaster. So that's a total irony. But I think my final point is actually about the critical importance of the Philippines at this moment globally. I think that we're all aware, and particularly in the context of this most recent terrible case of the Indian woman who died in Ireland, that RH issues and reproductive and sexual rights issues transcend borders at this point. This was a couple who probably were there, her husband was probably there as part of India's IT industry. And she's a dentist. You couldn't ask for a couple who's better placed to be able to have a safe delivery, miscarriage, abortion, whatever it was. And the atrocity that this 31-year-old woman had to die simply because the doctors believed against the Irish law, which says that if a woman's life is in danger, they can actually perform the abortion against the law, or because they were confused about the law, or because they were so brainwashed by the church. They allowed her to continue to suffer, and as long as that fetal heartbeat was there. And she suffered and then finally to die like that. That is an atrocity, but it's also a pointer, and there's something going on in the Indian airwaves right now, whether we can get some mobilization in the IT industry to say, don't send your people where they are going to be where the women are going to be at this kind of risk. So globalization, and globally at this point, the Philippines is crucial. The Philippines at this moment is a critical battleground. And we saw this Ben, Gigi, and those, Alex and all of us who were at the Commission on Population and Development last April. How the shock in the room when Ben de Leon landed up as head of delegation and began to speak, and when Gigi Francisco was sitting next to him as an official delegate, and the language coming from the Philippines delegation was something that nobody had ever heard before from the Philippines. The Holy See was in total shock. And then they were scrambling, there was desperate attempts, we know, to try and somehow change this and make this happen. Why is this? Because in fact, Philippines is one of the few countries where, for its levels, it shouldn't be where it is. It shouldn't be where it is. Well, we will have a speaker from Poland who will tell us what this means in a country like Poland. But in many other countries, including in Ireland itself, women, when they can, get out of there if they need to for an emergency. But if they can hold the Philippines, they feel that this is one of their bastions. And in a sense, it's crucial because in the context of ICPD at 20, some of us believe, and I do, that the Holy See sees this as a war to the death. That they really believe that over these next 2 years, they want to smash the movement for sexual and reproductive health and rights into the ground globally. And we see many signs of that in many places. So to lose the Philippines is a big loss for them. And equally, therefore, for us, winning the Philippines and winning the RH bill in the Philippines is a big victory, not just for the Philippines, but for women and their partners the world over. It will be a big, big win. Make no bones, I'm sure you're aware of that, but you need to be aware how important this is, and therefore how closely all of us from outside are looking at and watching what is happening in the Philippines and keeping our fingers crossed, just as we were keeping our fingers crossed during the US elections. We wouldn't end up with a Republican presidency. So, this is a globalized world. The US presidency matters, the Philippines RH bill matters for all of us, and we look forward to being with you, supporting you in any way that you feel we can, keeping quiet if that's what you want us to do, speaking up if that's what you want us to do, in whichever way you would like us to partner with you, we are here with you, and more power to you.